At my son's wedding, the mic died the instant I raised my glass, and I heard him murmur to his best man clear as a bell, "Once the hag's gone," a sentence that burned hotter than the stage lights. I didn't cry or plead. I breathed the way a woman my age learns to quiet is a tool, not a surrender. I walked to the lobby, asked for a place card that read, "Mother of the groom," photographed it beside the clock, and opened a red folder that would outlast anyone's whisper. That moment wasn't an ending. It was the first domino toward rooms where facts speak louder than gossip, and a microphone finally carries my voice. Before I continue the story, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. The room smelled like eucalyptus and warm bread, a trick caterers use to make strangers feel at home. I arrived on time in the navy dress my son once said made me look like I could handle anything. The venue was a renovated warehouse off Washington Avenue, brick bones, iron beams light that pooled on polished concrete. I paused at the back, letting the space breathe before it bit. Head table on a riser, a mirrored backdrop, a wired mic on a slim stand, cue cards in the MC's hand with my name written in. My table was close enough to the dance floor to smell the wax, far enough that I'd need to lean if I wanted to see the vows replay. The place settings glittered. When I reached the chair marked for me, the card said, "Guest Arlise." Not mother of the groom, guest, a word with edges. I ran a fingertip over the print and caught the font-thin serif cream stock, a faint, blind emboss. Someone had chosen it. Someone had approved it. I inhaled slowly the way the hospital taught me when tempers rose and lived through charts. The DJ slid a Motown track under the chatter. The MC tapped the mic, once smiled at me, and tilted his head toward the stand. 2 minutes, his eyes promised. I smoothed the corner of my card and rose when the cue came. My knees were steady. I have stood at bedsides and in court hallways. A wedding room does not frighten me. I took the microphone, lifted it, and the sound died. Not a crackle, not a hiss, nothing. In that strange, clean silence, I heard my son, a few feet behind me, lean toward his best man and mutter audibly, "Once the hag's gone." A small word can make a cathedral collapse. The metal in my spine went colder than the stem of the flute in my hand. I lowered the mic without looking at the booth. The MC's smile flickered and returned. The DJ pretended to fiddle with knobs. Around us, courtesy expanded like foam, filling every gap where decency should have stood. I gave the microphone back, nodded as if we had solved a technical issue, and took my seat. My heart beat once, twice, and then remembered who raised it. A slideshow began on the LED wall baby, Cheek's first trophies, college move-in, the engagement in Galveston. "Thank you to our families," the title card promised in cursive gold. The credits rolled. They thanked grandparents, living and gone aunts with their small dogs, mentors from summer leagues. They thanked the woman who once taught him algebra over the phone. My name was not there. Not the name he learned first, the one he used when the night terrors came after his father died. The screen changed to fireworks. The room applauded. I let the light strobe over my hands until it passed. Humiliation is a red heat that turns white if you let it. I let it. I indexed the room like a nurse mapping a code, who looked down, who looked through me, who looked satisfied. Darlie's chin moved like a metronome toward the DJ booth. The booth obeyed. The MC checked with the coordinator at the wall a quick glance that said, "Do we restore her?" The coordinator's lips barely moved. The answer was no. I lifted my water and sipped. Spilled nothing. My watch was my father's. I touched the worn leather and felt it answer me. Witness not seen. Ledger not plea. There is a quiet that is not defeat. It is storage. Music rose again, and with it the chirp of small kindnesses, the server who refilled my glass before it was empty, the cousin who sat but could not form a sentence, the friend from the neighborhood who squeezed my shoulder and asked about golf, as if golf could save us. I did not search the room for my son. A mother can find her child's face in the dark, and sometimes the dark is a mercy. I watched the command signals travel. Darlie tapped once, lights up. Twice spin the couple. Her eyes never touched me, which is a kind of touch. The DJ screen showed a schedule labeled "Peer Host Instruction Lines" that would later matter, though no one knew it yet. The MC read from his cards and skipped the line where my toast lived. I heard the paper breathe as it passed that word, mother. The crowd was kind in the way crowds are kind. They made space where they should have made noise. I weighed the choice to stand and ask for the mic again. Instead, I pressed the card with its demotion into my palm and let the corners mark me. I do not beg for the right to say a blessing over my own child. I do not bleed in public where the people you will need to call tomorrow can see you drowning. When the next course was set, I stood. My chair made no sound. I took my clutch, slid the wrong card inside, and walked to the lobby where the light was cooler. The front desk had a small bell. I pressed it, then pressed save on my phone's clock. Time Place Act. I have learned which details grow legs in a courtroom and which float away like confetti. This was never about a broken microphone or a skipped slide. This was about authorship, about who writes the story of a family and who is footnoted out of it. I had given my boy my cleverness and my calm. Tonight, I kept them for myself. I named the lines no one would cross again. Respect is not a flower you place in someone's hand. It is a fence you build and maintain. Aileen, the venue manager, walked toward me with a professional smile that knew how to carry a crisis without dropping it. I lifted my chin, returned the smile, and placed the bell back on its felt circle. The party roared one room away. I could smell the bread again. I was prepared. Aileen looked up with a calm service smile. "How can I help you, ma'am? I need a corrected place card," I said. "Mother of the groom. The seating file should reflect my role." She checked the screen, then a binder. "It does," she said, surprised. "Looks like a bad print in the batch." She fed a fresh card into the tray, pressed a brass stamp on the back, and wrote the time. "For your records." "For my records," I echoed. Patience is a kind of signature. On the lobby console, I set the new card beside the demotion I'd pocketed from the ballroom. The wall clock glowed over a vase of eucalyptus. I framed both cards and the clock in a single shot, then a second from a wide angle. In settings, I toggled location, kept full metadata, saved to the cloud to an external drive in my purse, and texted a copy to myself. 2 cards, 1 clock. 1 mother who would not be edited out. Through the glass office, I spotted Aileen with a headset and clipboard. I waited until she looked up. "Would you email me tonight's incident log?" I asked, "and the mic assignment roster. If there was a technical note during toasts, I'd like to understand it." She didn't flinch. "We keep an event log," she said evenly. "I'll note your request and forward to management. May I have your email?" I spelled it. She repeated it back. "Our audio contractor is Keen Sound," she added. "If there's a board file, we'll CC you. That would be helpful." We shook hands. 2 women doing their jobs. Outside, the valet lane glittered. The night air smelled like rain that wouldn't start. My car rolled forward and my phone lit with a message from Darlie, tomorrow 10 a.m. "Can you log the gifts?" "No hello." I screenshotted the thread and replied, "I'm not available. Periods make good fences." At the red light, I created a cloud folder named Wedding Evidence with subfolders, Cards, Texts, Venue. I dictated a note in a level voice Mike died at start of toast. Son muttered audible, "Once the hag's gone." Credit slide omitted my name. 2 place cards exist. Venue reprinted with timestamp. Logs requested. The light changed. I drove in quiet radio. At home, I set my purse on the counter, washed my hands, and laid the 2 cards on a tea towel. I scanned both sides, exported PDFs with embedded timestamps, and filed them. I drafted an email to Aileen. "Thank you for your help this evening. For my records, please send the incident log and any audio board notes related to the mic during scheduled toasts, plus the mic assignment roster. Best Arliss Reynolds. No heat, no edges. Send." My banking inbox sat like a ledger. Search deposit florist, search band retainer. Receipts lined up my card, my dates, my confirmations. On another screen, Darlie's public story scrolled past 100 hearts. Courtesy of Darley over florals I paid for. I booked the band over musicians whose deposit hit my account in June. I captured side-by-sides my PDFs on the left, her story frames on the right, today's date bar across the top like a witness. 2 short emails. For my records, would you confirm the name on the payer account and the amounts paid by me for tonight's services? An invoice copy would be appreciated. I BCC'd myself and saved each outgoing message as a PDF. The kettle clicked. While the water settled, replies arrived auto at first, then the florist's night manager confirmed payer Arliss Reynolds. Invoice attached. 2 minutes later, the band's manager confirmed retainer and balance paid by A. Reynolds. Attached. Download rename store. Folder S18 courtesy claims. Each click tightened the line that had gone slack around my heart. I wasn't angry now. I was aligned. Near midnight, the condo exhaled. I booked a Monday morning with my attorney and ally who knows that boundaries are love, arranged into lines. The calendar chimed once and went still. I slid both physical cards into a red folder and set it on my desk. Laptop off, lamps off. 1 kitchen candle left to finish its short sermon. 1 more message from Darley blinked. We'll need your speech text for the video cut. I let the screen dim. Some things do not merit oxygen. On the bed's edge, I stretched my hands, feeling the tiny ache where card corners had pressed. I thought of my son at 7, grass-stained and rule true, and the man who chose a different rule tonight. Love no longer blinds me. It clarifies. Before sleep, I opened the folder one last time. Everything sat where it belonged. Paper first, then speech, spine first, then kindness. I set the phone to do not disturb, rested my watch on the nightstand, and lay down in the quiet, loyal things make. Monday would come. I would be ready. I rose to photograph my wristwatch beside the cards, then the envelope with today's date in my handwriting. A tripod from a kitchen drawer steadied the phone. A ruler in frame proved scale. I exported a contact sheet and printed 2 copies for the red folder. A final email went to the photographer. If possible, please retain uncut footage around the toasts. I may purchase raw files. It read like any mother's request because it was. I am not building spectacle. By the sink, I rinsed the tea mug and thought of tomorrow's quiet walk church at 9, then paint for an hour. Revenge is easy theater. Repair is harder work. Tonight is neither. Tonight is order, line by line until the story can no longer be revised without me. I slept with the folder nearby. I woke before the sun and let the quiet settle over my condo like a clean sheet. Coffee steamed beside the laptop while I opened the folder I had named 2 nights ago wedding evidence. I clicked the photo of the 2 place cards, guest Arliss on the left, mother of the groom on the right, and pulled up the metadata. The timestamps matched the lobby clock. I exported a PDF and wrote a single line beneath it. 2 cards, 1 night. 1 truth. I printed it and slid it into the red folder. The second file held the slide that thanked our families. Its cool LED glow reached me even as a still image. No mother, no Arliss. I typed public omission documented and saved that note as well. My hands were steady. Steadiness after harm is its own medicine. By 7, I was dressed, keys in my hand, the red folder under my arm. The elevator hummed to the garage while I dictated a list into my phone. Revoke any prior powers of attorney. Springing POA, medical and financial, activated only upon 2 independent physicians, unrelated to me and unaffiliated with each other. Update my will. Establish a simple trust with a life estate in my home. These are safeguards, not punishments. I am not chasing revenge. I am building rails. Traffic toward Harris County moved in patient fits. I breathed through the lights and reminded myself I have given birth, buried a husband, paid 2 mortgages, and learned when silence is the only bridge that holds. This is another kind of household repair. Lindy Hart's office sits above a breakfast place that smells like warm peaches. Her receptionist offered water. I declined and kept the red folder in my lap. When Lindy came in, she didn't ask, "How are you?" She said, "Let's begin." And I opened the folder. We started with revocation, any prior powers of attorney canceled. I dated and signed. We moved to new documents, medical and financial POAs that do not wake up at someone's mood. 2 independent physicians, I said. No family signatures. Lindy nodded and read the triggers back to me slowly. We drafted will amendments that set my intentions in quiet ink. The trust would hold the condo and the accounts that made sense. I initialed each page, my name firm, my breathing even. We reviewed successor agents and the line I refuse to cross. No one speaks for me unless the law requires it, and 2 doctors agree my voice cannot carry. The conversation was clean, almost clinical, and in that cleanliness, something in me reassembled. When I signed, I thought of the microphone that went dead in my hand and found comfort in a pen that could not be muted. Before I left, Lindy slid a slim binder toward me. "Your red folder deserves a spine," she said. Tabs labeled POA Will Trust Correspondence. "We'll schedule capacity evaluations for our file purely protective. Paper keeps its promises." I booked the referrals, thanked her, and stepped into the noon heat that pressed my face like a stern ant. At a cafe down the block, I wrote 1 sentence on the back of my receipt. "Quiet isn't consent." I repeated it until it stopped sounding like courage and started sounding like hygiene. I tucked the strip into the binder pocket labeled Notes. Back home, the condo felt cool and factual. I drafted an email to the venue manager, Aileen Shore. I kept it cordial and precise, event name, room time. I requested the incident report, the microphone assignment roster, and the audio board logs for the exact minute the mic failed during my toast. I CC'd the audio tech, Maura Keene, and asked that replies include raw headers. I trimmed any heat from the words, "hit send," and watched the arrow turn my request into movement. I didn't expect a same-day reply, but the subject line arrived before my water glass emptied. Event report. Hail Voss. Aileen's message was tidy. We followed per host instruction regarding mic access. I stared at the phrase until it separated into its plain pieces. Per host instruction, not a glitch, a decision. I downloaded the message as a PDF, preserved the headers, and filed it. Then I exported the entire thread to a dated folder and backed it up. The afternoon narrowed into simple tasks. I hashed the PDF, logged the checksum, and wrote a short index of where each document lived. No speeches in my head. I washed 2 dishes, watered the snake plant, and returned to my list. Tomorrow, phone calls for the capacity evaluations, confirmations from vendors for payments, already sent a calendar hold for the trust signing. Each step calm, each step boring. Boring wins when people prefer drama. Before dusk, I placed the binder beside the red folder on my desk. Their edges made a neat cross. I let the room replay the weekend like a muted reel, the misnamed card, the dead mic, the erased slide, the text that assumed my service. I touched the watch my husband gave me for our last anniversary and felt the steady beat he left in my keeping. "Quiet isn't consent," I said out loud only once. It sounded like a door clicking shut from the inside. I powered down, drew the blinds, and stood at the window until the city's lights arranged themselves into a kind of mercy. I am not temporary. I am the woman who writes her name, files her papers, and refuses to be spoken for. Tomorrow will want more from me. Tonight I have done enough. The binder and the red folder held their place like bookends for the story I will tell exactly as it happened in ink that does not apologize. I set 3 water glasses on the coffee table and slid the dimmer down until the room felt neutral like a chapel with the hymn unsung. The papers stayed in the study. Out here, there would be only my back straight and their words finding where they could land. Shannon answered the buzzer, let them ride the elevator alone, then drifted toward the kitchen to fold towels no one had asked her to fold. A witness in soft shoes. They arrived on time carrying small storms. Joran stepped in first with a smile that tugged at one corner cologne, meant to say he was in charge. Darlie followed with a tablet hugged to her ribs and a brightness that never warmed the room. Weather the Astros traffic on 59. Not a syllable about the wedding. Their coats stayed on the chairbacks as if commitment itself were optional. I appreciate you coming, I said. Water, thanks. Mom Joran answered without drinking. Darlie checked her tablet. Big weekend, lots of emotions. We just want to make sure you're okay. Go ahead, I said. She tipped her head. You've seemed a little forgetful. The toast. Totally not your fault. Stress happens. We thought maybe touring a community could be wise. Just information. The suggestion fit me like a stranger's coat. No diagnosis, no label, I said evenly. I've scheduled independent capacity evaluations with physicians outside our circle. Results will go to my attorney. That's the channel. Joran rested his elbows on his knees. We're only worried about you living alone. Stairs alarms. I have a support system and safety measures. I'm not touring communities. Darlie pivoted on cue. Of course. Different topic, could you log the wedding gifts so we can send thank yous on time? You're so organized. Not tonight, I said, and not as a given. The air cooled by a few degrees. Joran looked at the ceiling, then back at me. Maybe someone should keep an eye on your finances. Just to be safe. Scammers target seniors. Good advice, I said, which is why I've updated my arrangements. Any questions about my finances can go through my counsel. I won't be reviewing documents with family. Darlie's smile tightened like a hidden seam. We're not trying to control anything. Then there's no problem, I said and stood. Not abrupt, just the meeting ending because I was done hosting the insinuation. I walked them to the door. Thank you for coming. No diagnosis, no label. I watched the elevator doors close on their reflections, two people shrinking to metal, and then to silence. The apartment settled the way a book closes, a soft thud, a breath released. I rinsed the untouched glasses, wiped a dry ring from the table, and stepped onto the balcony. Midtown lay in a hush of neon and late trains, the city breathing past midnight as if it knew how to keep moving without permission from anyone. When grief knows your address, dignity must learn the lock. I stood with my hands on the rail until the heat left them, until my pulse stepped down a rung. The phone lit near midnight. Joran. Mom, he said, the words stretched thin. I'm sorry if you felt hurt at the reception. Things were hectic. Maybe we can look at your will together, make sure it's current. Texas is a one-party consent state. I kept my voice level and let the recorder run. Thank you for calling, I said. I handle my documents with my attorney. I'm not trying to pry. I know. I let the pause arrive and leave. Good night. Good night. I saved the audio, exported the metadata, and dropped it into the red folder with a clean label, 0282725 call from J apology if phrasing request to view will. No agreement given. Then a brief email to Lindy, met with J and D, expressed boundary, received late call. Audio preserved. Facts, not feelings. Feelings are for the balcony where night air thins the noise. I thought of the boy who once slept in the back seat with a plastic dinosaur trapped in his fist, the nights I measured his breaths through croup, the early shifts and the long ones that bought cleats, Reed's band fees, science kits. Love is a ledger, but not the kind he keeps now. Mine is tallied in rides before dawn and lights left on so a teenager could stumble to water. His balance seems to settle only when I am small enough to fit in a margin. The evaluations are on the calendar. 2 physicians, different systems, neither beholden to a family story. Let them test what they will. I am not afraid of clarity. I am done with shadows used as weapons. Inside, Shannon peeked around the corner. You good, I am, I said. Thank you for staying off stage. You didn't raise your voice once. I didn't need to. We shared the quiet smile women trade when we've carried our load the long way home. She turned off the kitchen light. The apartment clicked softer. Before sleep, I wrote a single line on a sticky note and pressed it inside the red folder so my future hands would touch it first. Quiet isn't consent. I turned the lamp off. The room returned to its low chapel light and the city kept breathing beyond the glass. On my desk, the red folder sat like a stoplight, and beside it, the calendar app blinked two gentle flags: Friday Labs, Monday Cognition. I set reminders, brewed chamomile, and let the kettle's small whistle count me back from anger. Tomorrow I'll file the vendor confirmations and check the venue's headers again. Tonight I keep the only vow I control: I won't argue, I'll act. The certified envelope waited against my door like a dare. I signed for it, thanked the carrier, and set it on kitchen counter. I breathed, then slit the seam with the paring knife I keep for oranges. Temporary guardianship. Those were the bolded words at the top. Polite insinuations wrapped in formatting followed. I checked the stove clock, wrote the time beside my signature on the receipt, and took a photo of both. I scanned the pages, saved them as one PDF, and dropped the file into the red folder on my desktop. G intent 090125. I logged the tracking number, photographed the postmark, and added both to the index. I started the night of the wedding. The sting rose and fell like touching a hot pan. I didn't call my son. I called my attorney. Lindy answered on the second ring. I told her what the envelope said and what it didn't. I forwarded the scan, and we set a strategy call for noon. While the kettle heated, I typed a line in my notes: keep conflict in the lane it arrived. When the water clicked off, I poured tea-added lemon and felt my shoulders unlock a notch. Procedure is not comfort, but it is a handrail. Before noon, I confirmed capacity evaluations I'd set last week, one with my primary, one with a neurologist who treats my migraines. 2 independent physicians' written reports to counsel no family gatekeeping, no hallway summaries. I printed the appointment cards and taped them inside the red folder, where I couldn't mistake a feeling for a fact. The calendar chirped. Noon. On speaker, Lindy and I walked through the packet. We highlighted phrases that match last Wednesday's living room performance: increasing forgetfulness, overwhelmed by details, concern for financial safety. No citations, no medical notes, assertions dressed as care. We'll demand specifics, Lindy said, and file the evaluations as they come in. Meanwhile, no direct discussions with them about any documents. I wrote that in my ledger and boxed it. I drafted a brief phone script and taped it beside landline. Please direct legal questions to my attorney. I said it out loud until it lost heat and sounded like a fact. Then I returned to the quiet work that keeps a life-upright laundry email watering the basil. Every small thing done was a vote for normal. At 3:15, a measured knock. A woman stood at my door with a badge that read, Social Services. We received an anonymous request for a welfare check, she said. May I come in? I waved her toward the kitchen. Water. She accepted. I set out a glass, then my driver's license, Medicare card, and a copy of my advance directives. I didn't perform, I showed. She asked how I managed medications. I opened the pill organizer and the notebook where I keep refill dates and blood pressure readings. She asked about safety. I pointed to the stove's automatic shutoff, the grab bar in the shower, the medical alert pendant I wear when I sleep. She asked about support. I listed the building manager, my church contact, and my neighbor who checks on me when it storms. She took notes as if each answer fit its proper box. It felt practical, not punitive. Do you feel safe living alone? She asked. Yes, I said. And I have a plan if that ever changes. We stood, and I walked her to the door. You've been very helpful, she said. I anticipate a no concerns notation in my report. When she left, I let the quiet settle. Then I wrote the visit start and end times in the ledger and opened my email. An hour later, her summary arrived. No concerns. I downloaded the PDF, hashed it, and filed it in the red folder under Welfare Outcome. I sent Lindy a copy with a 2-line note, anonymous check, complete. Favorable finding. She replied with the filing deadline for our response. I penciled the date on a sticky note and moved it to tomorrow's planner page. If they wanted noise, they wouldn't find it here. At 5, Lindy called to debrief the guardianship letter. We read it line by line, pausing over phrases that had traveled from living room to stationery without picking up a single fact. This reads like a narrative trying to find evidence, she said. We'll give the court evidence trying to find the truth. Satisfaction flickered, cool, not bitter. We planned a counter and affidavit summarizing how I manage daily life supported by third-party verifiers. We listed them: my pharmacist, the building manager, my church coordinator. I drafted polite emails requesting short statements, confirming what they already see me do: pick up refills on time, pay rent, directly coordinate volunteer shifts. I BCC'd myself, saved each sent message as a PDF, and added them to the day's index. Evening came in with a Gulf breeze. I took my coffee onto the balcony and watched the lights slide off the glass towers downtown. The envelope that had looked so loud at morning seemed smaller now, just paper doing what paper does until a person tells it the truth. I opened the ledger and wrote one line I could hold: "They can push paper. I'll bring proof." Inside, I closed the red folder with a muted click. The basil needed one last sip. So did I. I set the kettle, rinsed my cup, and turned off the kitchen light. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt aligned, like a picture finally straight on a wall you pass every day. Tomorrow would bring forms and phone calls. Tonight I had order a handrail and the quiet satisfaction of steps taken in the right sequence. Okay. Yes. The phone's glow clipped the dark like a scalpel. Password reset requested. 1:14 a.m. brokerage account. I lay still long enough to slow my breath, then sat up and slid on my glasses. Panic is a habit I retired years ago. Checklists are what I keep. I opened the drawer where I keep a small spiral labeled security, flipped to the first page, and followed my own handwriting. I woke the screen unlocked with my thumb and used the trusted app path to change the password. I rotated the recovery codes, turned off SMS, and set the authenticator as primary, then added a fresh passphrase in the little book written twice, once in ink, once in patience. Screenshots captured each step: the alert banner, the settings page, the success confirmation. I took a single sip of water, felt the cold hit my chest, and let the quiet stretch. At the kitchen table under the pool of the pendant lamp, I forwarded the screenshots to my email with the subject 1:14 a.m. reset note. I added a line with the exact time and my location, CC'd Lindy, and attached a short paragraph about the wedding, the slide, the mic, and the guardianship letter, now alive in its own folder. Then I saved everything to the red folder index and closed the laptop like a book someone will want later. Dawn started as a pale seam behind the blinds. At 8 on the dot, I called the brokerage fraud line. The representative verified me 3 different ways, all of which I answered without flourish: address, last transaction security image. I asked for a temporary lock and a login audit. She placed me on a brief hold. I watched the second hand sweep around my kitchen clock, thought about the night at the venue, and the way people had looked purposefully away. The hold music ended. "We've engaged our compliance team," she said, returning to the line. A new voice arrived, level and awake. "This is Zara Cole Compliance." I liked that she used her name. I read her my short incident note, the kind with straight edges, and offered to send the screenshots. She listened without interruption. "We'll place enhanced verification on your profile," she said. "No beneficiary or POA changes will be processed without in-person ID and a callback to the number on file." I repeated those words back to her. She confirmed, then added that any suspicious requests would trigger a manual review and a call to me. An email pinged while we spoke. Change request denied, suspected undue influence. No updates processed. I downloaded the PDF, hashed the file the way my librarian friend had taught me, and tucked it into the red folder with the others. I placed credit freezes with the bureaus. I set alerts at my bank. I created a little checklist titled Beneficiaries Audit, printed the current designations, and slipped them into a manila sleeve. The nurse in me labeled everything left margin neat as a ward chart. I did not text accusations. I sent a single sentence to my son: "Any questions about my finances should go through my counsel." I didn't wait for dots to appear. I wrote down the time sent, archived the thread, and put the phone face down beside the coffee maker. A hummingbird hovered at the balcony planter, and then vanished as if to remind me that speed and stillness often share a hinge. Zara called back mid-afternoon. "Your alerts are active," she said. "Our recording notes that we reviewed your protections." I thanked her for being exact. Exactness is a kindness in times like these. After we hung up, I standardized file names, date, time, source, action, and added a one-line description at the top of each file who asked what happened, how it ended. I printed one hard copy set for the binder that now lives beside the red folder, the two of them like bookends around a life I intend to keep orderly. I stood at the window and watched the light turn the glass towers the color of honey. The old urge to explain myself rose and then faded. I have learned there is no speech that cures someone else's appetite. Systems, though, systems can hold. The wedding taught me how quickly a room can erase a mother. The night taught me how quickly a misclick can invite a stranger into the accounts I built one shift at a time. The lesson from both is the same: don't plead with people who enjoy the erasing. Fortify the edges and the records. Before I closed the laptop for the afternoon, I placed a small sticky note on the inside cover. Call back only to numbers on file. It seems silly a reminder to my own future self, but tiny redundancies are what keep a life intact. I checked my smoke detectors, the battery on the door camera, and the emergency contact card taped inside the pantry. Not because I am frightened, but because routines are my answer to other people's improvisations. I set a weekly calendar alert labeled Review Safeguards and let the reminder sit like a lighthouse, steady and boring in the best sense. When my hands finally stilled, the apartment felt level like a ship finding its keel after a swell. Silence confirmed what the paperwork had. Yes. I breathed out once. I brewed tea. The kettle whistled once and quieted. I took the mug to the balcony and wrote a line in my ledger. They can push paper. I will bring proof. The city answered with traffic and an airplane dragging a white thread across the sky. I closed the ledger and the red folder and the door one after the other, each click a small lock turning. I set the room like a courtroom without a judge. 2 mugs, 3 notepads, the red folder centered like a placard. Blinds half open to the late light, the TV black, the stereo mute. I laid my phone face up with the ringer high so no one could claim I hid anything. The coffee table carried only what the conversation should touch. They buzzed at 4. I opened, stepped aside and offered seats with an open palm. No small talk. We had tried that before, and small talk had grown teeth. Joanne took the end of the sofa. Darlie slid beside him with her tablet tucked like a clipboard. I kept my back straight and my voice even. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Let's be clear and brief." Darlie crossed her legs and smiled the way PR people do when cameras are near. "We thought it might help to simplify some paperwork, Arliss," she said. "Families do better when everyone has joint visibility." Joanne added carefully, "We don't want surprises." I nodded once. Nor do I. They waited for me to fill the silence. I let it stand until it belonged to me. Then I opened the red folder, removed a single page, and read one sentence aloud in a tone meant for depositions, not drama. "I hereby revoke all prior powers of attorney." I placed the page back inside and laid a brass key on top of the folder. The key made a quiet, final sound against the cardboard, like a bell that announces closing time. "This stays with me," I said. "Any questions about my documents go through my attorney." Darlie's smile thinned. "That feels adversarial." Couples our age often coordinate with parents to make sure estates are aligned. "My estate will not be managed by a committee," I said. "Nor by inference, nor by pressure framed as care." Joanne tried nostalgia. "Mom, remember when Dad got sick, and I remember every bill I paid and every form I read without help," I said. "If you have a legal question, email counsel. Otherwise, we're not discussing my paperwork." He looked at the key as if it might explain me. It did. He just didn't like the language. Darlie pivoted to soft tones. "No one is trying to take anything. We're talking about transparency. We want to avoid misunderstandings." "So do I said. "That's why we write things down." My tablet chimed. I glanced at the screen and saw a new email slide into view. Maura Keene, subject line board log, 8:22, 8:27 p.m. I did not let my face change. I opened the message, scrolled once, then turned the tablet so its glass faced them. "Would you read that line for me?" I asked. Darlie leaned in. Joran leaned too, the way you lean toward a cliff when you want to tell yourself you are not afraid of falling. The log entry was plain text against a white background captured from the soundboard export. "Host account Mike Channel 3. "Mute," applied, it said. Time-stamped to the minute I had stood with a toast in my throat and a dead mic in my hand. No one spoke. I reclaimed the tablet and forwarded the message to my attorney with a 3-line summary. Facts, not feelings. Darlie found her voice first. "Glitches happen," she said lightly. "Vendors cover themselves with jargon." "It doesn't mean it means what it says," I replied, "and what it says is enough for me." Joran looked at the window. His reflection was thin against the glass, a man outlined in afternoon light and choices. "We didn't tell anyone to hurt you," he said. "I'm not grading motives," I said. "I'm managing outcomes." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Darlie smoothed her skirt, a ritual of control. "So where does this leave us?" she asked. "Simple," I said. "If you need to reach me about family meals, you can call. If you need to reach me about my finances or documents, contact my attorney. Do not contact vendors or institutions on my behalf. Do not speak for me." "You're shutting us out," Joran said softly. "I'm drawing a boundary," I said. "There's a difference." Silence again, shorter now. I stood signaling the meeting's end without ceremony. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I have another call in 10 minutes. I walked them to the door. Darlie offered a hug she didn't mean. I answered with a nod that did. Joran paused in the hallway as if he might say something true, then let the elevator bell save him. When the doors closed, I locked the deadbolt, not because I feared them, but because doors deserve certainty. I logged their exit, the click of the lock quiet, returning to its size. The room felt square again, edges settling around me. Dusk gathered. I put the brass key back in my pocket and the red folder back in the drawer where it lives. Then I opened the tablet again, and reread the line from the log until the sting behind my eyes changed shape. Not tears, not anymore. Recognition. I forwarded the email to counsel with a clear subject added today's notes to my evidence ledger, and took one more photo of the key on the folder for my records. My phone stayed on the table, lit and honest. The city hummed outside. I poured the last of the coffee, now lukewarm, and stood by the window with the cup in both hands. A neighbor watered a plant. The leaves tipped, and a drip ran from the railing to the air. It looked like relief. Quiet isn't surrender, I thought. Quiet is control. The sentence had been spoken. The lock set the proof delivered without a speech. That was enough for one day, and enough is a powerful word when you have learned how to use it. Security at the Harris County Courthouse hummed. I slid my red folder onto the tray, set my keys beside it, and felt the marble cool through my shoes. The overhead monitor flashed our docket, once then steadied. I breathed in for 4, out for 6. I wasn't here to win a scene. I was here to close a chapter. Lindy met me past security. No speeches. In a voice like a church whisper, she confirmed both capacity evaluations were clear, the social workers no concerns on record, the brokerage compliance letter ready in our tab. We reviewed the order of proof the way a choir reviews a program entrance verse. Refrain. No solos. No improvisation. Inside, the air felt curated. We rose when the judge entered. Names on the record. I faced the bench, not the row behind me. I did not search for my son or his wife. The judge scanned the file and lifted her eyes. Opposing counsel stood to withdraw without prejudice, citing evolving facts and family communication. One eyebrow rose. Lindy didn't object. The record already spoke. In a measured tone, the judge reminded the room that guardianship is a remedy, not a lever. She dismissed the petition and entered an admonition about misuse. The gavel's tap was soft. It still rang like brass. At the clerk's window, fluorescent light returned the world to small things. A stamp clicked down. Ink sealed the dismissal. I placed the certified copy into the red folder as if it were a glass ornament. Breath in, breath out. One page, and it carried a room of air. In the hall near the elevator, Duran half-turned words hovering. I met his eyes long enough to be human, not long enough to be bait. Council will coordinate, I said, and stepped in with Lindy. Doors closed. Silence rose and settled. The afternoon belonged to steadier ground. At the community center, Reverend Milana reviewed a drafted character and competence letter about my pantry schedules and reliability. He added 2 plain sentences in his blocky hand. The secretary notarized. The stamp thumped like an amen. I thanked them, labeled the sleeve Community References, and tucked the letter inside. Evening scattered light through my blinds. I set the red folder on the kitchen table and opened my ledger. 2 short entries. Guardianship petition dismissed on record. Community reference letter signed and sealed. I scanned both, backed them up, and slid fresh paper into the printer tray. The apartment hummed a neighbor's radio, the elevator's soft sigh, my kettle muttering. I carried tea to the balcony. Houston stretched in plains of brick and glass, the sky rinsed in silver. Cars braided along the freeway like a restless ribbon. I rested my hands on the rail, felt the metal's stored heat fade under my palms. I didn't rehearse speeches. I didn't bargain with memory. Quietly, I said, "Let proof speak, and let me stay kind." The words vanished into air, but their weight settled like a stone that steadies a paper stack. Mercy can live inside restraint, and today it did. I let the record carry what my voice could have sharpened. Not every door must be slammed to prove it can close. I have learned to trade heat for form, and form held. In public rooms, memory travels better on paper than on volume. I am not moved by spectacle anymore. I am moved by stamps, signatures, and dates. The hallway swallowed what should not be said, and I was grateful for the swallow. People think kindness is soft. It can be load-bearing when framed by law. I thought of pantry shifts and slow quilts and names written cleanly on envelopes. All of it is practice for days like this. Steady hands, clear lines, no waste. A mother's love is not a blank check, and mothering myself requires ledgers. Grief visits, but it does not get a key. If amends come, they will knock, and I will see them through glass before I open. Until then, I will keep files like I keep promises labeled, dated, stored. I shut the balcony door and turned out the lamp. The folder stayed on the table, the key in my pocket, not as a threat, not as a trophy, but as a receipt for dignity. Tomorrow I will send a thank you to the clerk whose stamp did not tremble water, the basil on the sill, and answer only the calls that come through the channels I named. Tonight I will sleep. Before bed I checked the backups again. Hash values matched. I read the strings once, then closed the lid. I sent Lindy 1-line dismissal filed. Community letter attached. Send. Archive. I wiped the counter, small hygiene that keeps a mind from fraying. On the fridge, the week's list waited pharmacy refill, library workshop, Sunday usher schedule. I added mail thank you cards. Paper won't heal a family, but it honors the part of me that refuses to disappear. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Down the block, a dog barked once, then stopped. I allowed myself 10 breaths of unguarded feeling. 10, not 11. Hurt is honest. It gets loud if you feed it. I set it down like a bowl that isn't my favorite, but still part of the set. The dead mic will live in one log line, the missing slide beside a clerk's stamp, the mutter answered by a life that keeps moving on time. In the bedroom, I drew the shades and smoothed the quilt pieced from shirts no one remembers. Thread holds what voices drop. I turned the phone face down. If a late message came to test a boundary, it could meet the dark and wait. Some storms end when you stop listening for them. In Lindy's conference room, the walnut table shone like calm water. I set my red folder down and for a beat laid my palm flat on its cover the way a nurse settles a chart before speaking. 3 aims, I said. My autonomy now. A clear path if I can't speak later. And a legacy that can't be gamed. Lindy nodded once. The city moved behind the glass like a distant tide. Inside the room, everything felt measured. We began with the trust. She titled it, the Arliss Foundation Trust, and read each section aloud, steady as a metronome. I would remain trustee while I'm able. A corporate successor would step in if two independent physicians ever documented that I could not safely manage my affairs. Income for my maintenance, emergency reserves for medical needs, and grants in my name to the after-school programs where I volunteered for years. The words were plain, not barbed. Protection, not punishment. Guardrails, not grudges, I said, and she smiled at the phrase and typed it as a comment I could see mirrored on the screen. Any person who tried to force guardianship without good faith medical basis would be barred from distributions. Not vengeance, just a lock that clicks when someone jiggles the handle. Criteria lived on paper, not in moods. It soothed something in me to see the structure sit there, unable to roll back with the weather. We turned to my home. The deed would move into the trust with a retained life estate for me. I keep every right to live there, right down to the basil on the balcony. When I die, the value goes to the trust's scholarship fund. I pictured the condo's quiet evenings, the view of taillights on the 59 ramp, and felt the same grounded ease I get from folding warm laundry. This part, I said, tapping the paragraph, means I can sleep. By late morning, we walked to the notary. My signature met the page again and again, each stroke a small breath out. Trust deed instructions, trustee triggers. The stamp thudded like a muted drum. Pages slid back into order. The binder straps hugged the stack. I thought of the night my mic died and how my name left the screen. Ink is louder than a banquet. In the afternoon, we audited beneficiaries. Old transfer on death forms became fresh directions to the trust. I initialed deliberately left margin notes where future me might need a breadcrumb. Call Zara if there's ever a doubt. We built a letter to my broker explaining the trust's authority and my expectation that no change would be honored without in-person verification by me and a callback to a number on file. The letter was short, polite, and sharp as a new needle. The next morning, I sat with a banker at the Galleria branch while Zara joined by phone. We opened education accounts in the trust's name, with language that kept the door human and fair. If I have grandchildren who meet the criteria, they're first in line. If I don't, the funds sponsor local students nominated by the community center where I tutor. Money becomes shoes and books and bus passes, evidence of care, not bait on a hook. I signed Zara, confirmed the undue influence flags from earlier remain in. On my way out, I stopped at the building manager's office. Ms. Ortega, who has watched me wrangle deliveries and maintenance for years, read a short statement Lindy drafted. It simply said that I manage my own logistics and handle my apartment responsibilities without assistance. She signed without ceremony and pressed the notary's seal like a coin into soft wax. Ordinary truth can be beautiful. Back home, I set the brass key beside the binder instead of inside it. The key is mine, but the weight of what it guards now rests in a structure that doesn't depend on anyone's mood. I made 3 scans: the recorded deed, the trust certificate, and the 529 confirmations. Each file earned a clear name and a twin in the cloud. I logged the day in one line: trust funded, life estate recorded, education accounts opened, and let the ink dry. Evening spread across the windows like a quilt. I brewed tea and stood in the hush that follows good work. Revenge was the wrong word for what I felt. My son's mutter at the wedding still lives in me like a bruise you stop bumping. But what they once treated as a prize to be grabbed is now a promise, an engine for quiet futures. Somewhere a child will read under a lamp that stayed on because a stranger cared. Somewhere a bus will be caught instead of missed. I lifted my cup to the room that has held me. I remembered the judge's dry voice and clerk's stamp, clean, unfussy closure that reset the tempo of my days, like a window finally opened. I wrote a note for future me and slid it into the front pocket. If anyone calls you selfish for choosing boundaries, remember who tried to write over your name. The sentence looked plain. I don't need speeches. I need procedures that hold when hands shake. Before bed, I opened the balcony door. Houston hummed. Far below, a bus hissed and moved on. I whispered to the dark to bless the choice, let proof speak. Let gifts move where welcome. Let me stay kind without being erased. Then I shut the red folder and turned off the lamp, the quiet clicking into place like a final satisfying lock. I exhaled. The courier arrived just after lunch with an envelope blue seal, neat as a badge. I set it on the counter, washed my hands, and opened it slowly. The letter inside was plain all boxes, but one sentence stood in the center like a spine. Any request to change my beneficiaries or powers of attorney had been blocked. In-branch verification was required with callback to the number already on file. I photographed the page, saved the metadata, and filed it in my red folder. I called Lindy from the kitchen table and read the sentence aloud exactly as printed. She asked for the reference string in the footer, then said, "Good. Keep it with you tonight. 3 lines only if asked." The kettle clicked. I tucked the letter behind the truss tab, fastened the clasp, and watched the afternoon tilt toward dusk. By 6, the community center foyer smelled like floor polish. An easel stood near the welcome table. The Arley's Foundation Trust Neighborhood Scholars. No spotlight, just clean type dates and a card noting the first grant cycle in spring. Neighbors drifted in their Sunday best Tuesday clothes. One woman read the placard and gave me the kind of smile you offer someone who has survived a riptide. Maura met me by the stage. "Levels are good," she said, tapping the soundboard with a practiced finger. On the playlist, she had cued a 2-minute montage, still photos of the center, and a guest-shot video from the wedding granny, but the phone mic had caught enough room tone. "Only if you nod," she added. I thanked her and felt the familiar steadiness of women who rehearse quiet rescues. Reverend Molina opened with 2 sentences about dignity and second chances. He did not say my name first. He invited everyone to breathe, then introduced the scholarship plaque. He told a story about a boy who learned to read under a streetlight and now teaches 3rd grade. By the time he turned and welcomed me forward, the audience was silent in that churchway hush that arrives right before a hymn. I stepped to the lectern. The wood was warm from the last hand. I set the brass key beside the red folder, looked up at faces I knew from food drives and car washes, and began. "Thank you for coming," I said. "A year can be short and cruel. Tonight I want to talk about how we keep what is kind." I spoke about mothers who pass down recipes and stubbornness, about how silence can shelter or erase. "Quiet," I said, "isn't consent." Then I nodded to Maura. The lights dimmed. The screen came alive. There I was again in that ballroom silver dress hand, steady around a glass of water, no microphone. The clip was imperfect, a little sway, a little laughter, but my words were clear enough a blessing for a son to build a life that did not require anyone to be small. The room breathed with the video, not with pity but with recognition, as if everyone had once stood up to speak and felt a hand reach for the dial. Near the exit doors, I saw Joranne and Darlie. They had come without a greeting and without flowers. Darlie kept her eyes on the screen. Joranne studied his shoes. I did not gesture. I did not harden. I let the montage finish, then let the quiet sit one heartbeat longer than comfort. "Thank you," I said, and turned the easel toward the audience. 2 nameplates waited on the plaque blank for now. Each spring, 2 neighborhood students will receive support for tuition tools or the time they need to finish. If you want to help, the office has forms. If all you can give is a kind word to a weary parent, that counts too. A grandmother in the front row reached for my hand and gave it a squeeze that traveled up my arm and settled behind my ribs. Afterward, people moved toward the cookie tables and the coffee urns. Joranne stepped halfway down the aisle. He stopped when he saw the brass key and the red folder resting on the lectern. "Mom," he said, almost a whisper. "Thank you for coming," I answered. "Any family matters go through counsel." I kept my voice steady, neither gate nor invitation. He swallowed and nodded. Darlie touched his sleeve. They left without banging the door. I packed the folder and the key, then found Maura coiling cables. "Will you send that board note?" I asked. She showed me her phone. "Already sent. Under her subject line, I read the single-row host account Mike Channel 3, mute, applied 8:22/8:27 p.m. I squeezed her hand. "Let the logs be the logs," she said and smiled. At home, I set the folder on my desk and turned on the lamp with the sea glass base. I logged the day in 3 lines: compliance letter received and filed, toast restored in community, scholarship plaque unveiled. I slid the letter behind the trust tab and closed the rings. The city hummed its low electric hymn through the window screen. I made tea and held the cup until the heat moved into my palms. I did not feel triumph. I felt rooms aligning: the ballroom that muted me, the auditorium that heard me, and the small square of light on my own desk where a key and a folder rested. Revenge once sounded like fire. Tonight it sounded like a scholarship application being stamped, received like a voicemail from a donor who had been quiet until they weren't like a son learning that some doors do not open to anyone but the person who holds the lock. I turned off the lamp. In the dark, the brass key kept its shape patient as a truth you do not have to shout. Darlie's text arrived just after breakfast, pruned and glossy, like something she drafted twice. Supporters brunch at the River Oaks Club, it read. Would love your presence. No time for pleasantries, only the posture of inclusion. I set the phone on the counter, let the kettle sing, and answered, yes, briefly. Not a truce, a reconnaissance. I looped Lindy in with a screenshot and my window, 45 minutes, no commitments. She replied in 3 words, observe, say little. Then asked me to set a phone alarm so I wouldn't be cornered by courtesy. I slid her card into the red folder, breathed with the steam, and chose a jacket that didn't invite fussing or pity. The club foyer was all citrus polish and controlled laughter. Gideon Price stood beneath a gilt sconce greeting donors by name. When he saw me, his smile shortened, not gone edited. Across the room, Darlie was already workshopping a version of the wedding, calling the audio failure a misunderstanding, smoothing the edges, as if the word could sand down the fact. I took water, not champagne, and my seat at the edge of the room. They began with slides, her project in saturated colors, her captions in that careful voice that promises outcomes. Family support, she said, turning to scan the room with the confidence of a person who trusts her lighting. Eyes brushed past me and kept moving. The first question came from a woman in pearls who sounded both curious and cautious. And the court matter, she asked, as if asking about a forecast. The room changed temperature. You could hear the ice shift in glasses. Darlie inhaled to answer, but Gideon stepped to the microphone with the economy of a man paid to speak only once. Our firm values judgment, he said. In light of recent events, we'll pause our public association pending an internal review. It was bloodless and final, delivered with club diction. No one clapped. No one needed to. Phones lowered those little metal fish that smell embarrassment. I looked at my screen and saw that the alarm had 1 minute left. I stood, thanked the host with a nod, and walked out without a backward turn. The air in the parking garage was the kind that steals perfume and gives back truth. Mom. Duran's voice chased me under the concrete. He caught up breath, uneven tie loosened. He didn't reach for me. Good. I heard what she said. He blurted. I didn't stop any of it. I wanted the money. 6 words that made the echo return. I leaned against the rail because it was there, not because I needed it, and waited for the old reflex to soothe, to explain, to arrive and pass. You can make amends where you broke trust, I said. My door is for respect, not strategy. I gave him Lindy's card and watched him tuck it into a pocket as if it were a ticket out of weather. What do you want me to do? He asked a boy's question inside a man's throat. Begin with the truth, I said, and opened my car. He nodded the way people nod when their bodies know something their pride can't yet say. Back home, the alarm I'd silenced felt like a metronome still ticking in my pocket. I made tea, pressed the voicemail button, and listened once. I'm sorry, Duran said. I'm sorry for letting it happen. I'm sorry for the petition. He didn't say the word money again. He didn't need to. I saved the file as J Confession transcribed a single sentence and put both where I put things I won't weaponize in the log, not in the mouth. By late afternoon, I was at the community center, the hall that smells like Murphy oil soap and children's paper. Reverend Molina had 2 folders open and a pencil behind his ear. We reviewed attendance records, teacher notes, and the kind of recommendations that are more story than credential. 2 names rose like buoys. He asked if I wanted to sleep on it. I did not. We penciled our choices and started the calls for references. Somewhere in the building a vacuum hummed. Somewhere outside a basketball threw. At my desk that evening I wrote a letter I would not send. Love asks nothing. Access asks everything. I put the line on clean paper and folded it once the way you fold a flag you're not ready to fly. I logged the day without adjectives, brunch invitation accepted. Public association paused, confession received and archived, finalists shortlisted, proof not performance, boundaries not theater. I washed the cup, turned off the kitchen light, and stood at the sliding door while the city softened. Silence had cost me years of peace when I mistook it for harmony. Tonight it cost me nothing. I had used it as a tool, not a hiding place. The red folder lay where I'd left it, edges square, the brass key, heavy in my pocket, not as a threat, but as a reminder. Authority belongs where responsibility lives. I whispered one sentence to the dark for me alone. Let proof speak, and let me stay kind. Before bed, I called the quiet. What it was. Not a wall, a fence with a gate. Only I can open. I listed next steps on a sticky note reference calls, Monday trust notice to the center bulletin, a car oil change, and set it beneath the brass key. I thought of the wedding toast that finally found air, and of the boys and girls who would feel their names called clearly. No erasures, no muting. Not here. I stacked the mail, rinsed the spoon, and let the house exhale around me, plain, sturdy mine enough for sleep and morning. Good night, me. Morning peeled open like a page I'd been saving. On the counter lay a small list in my handwriting, vault certificates, scholarships. I touched each word with a fingertip, not as a ritual, but as a promise to myself. The brass key was warm from the sun that crossed my kitchen table. A sealed letter, addressed in blue ink, slid into my purse beside it. I locked the condo, listened once to the quiet, and exhaled the kind of breath that leaves no fog behind. The vault lobby downtown smelled faintly of paper and polish. I presented my ID signed where the attendant tapped and followed her through the steel door that closed like a sentence with a period. In the booth, I set the brass key on the felt, opened the long box, and placed the notarized envelope inside. Instructions on death. The heading read plain words, no drama. A copy of the trust index followed. Nothing flashy, nothing secret, only order that would hold when my hands could no longer do the hold. When I stepped out, the attendant smiled without questions. At the bench by the window, Lindy met me with a clipboard and that lawyerly calm that burns hot and never shows it. I gave her the duplicate key and a small index card listing the contents, initials precise. She repeated the callback protocol and tucked both into a slim pouch. No speeches. Redundancy is love for the living. Back home, I sent myself an email with the time, the box number, and the custody note. 1 paragraph, 3 lines. I printed it, slid it behind the vault tab, and let the printer cool. The apartment felt the way a room feels after guests leave, and the chairs go back under the table, still respectful, ready for the next good thing. By late afternoon, the community center hummed with the soft noise of people who know one another's names. Reverend Molina squeezed my hand near the stage. On the easel, Neighborhood Scholars 2025. No spotlight, just clean letters on a whiteboard. Maura adjusted a microphone with a gentle nod. The same hands that had sent me the log now steadied the sound for something kinder. We began on time. I stepped to the lectern and told a small truth the size of a seed. Legacies aren't vaults, they're bridges. I said less than I could have, more than I used to. Then I called 2 names, Anna and Malik. Their teachers stood with them, shoulders squared in that particular mix of pride and relief. I explained simply why each one had been chosen, steady work kindness that showed up when no one handed out points for it, grit without spectacle. We posed for a photo, but only one. When the applause softened, I walked to the sidewall with the cloth-draped plaque. For the unseen hands who raised us, the plate read, when I lifted the fabric. Below, in smaller type, First Dedication by Arliss. No victory horn sounded. A grandmother dabbed her eyes with a napkin and whispered, "Thank you to no one in particular." That was enough music for me. Near the back, Joran sat at the aisle alone. He didn't wave. I didn't beckon. When our eyes met, we each gave the smallest nod. A boundary can be a bridge, too, if both ends are honest. Darlie wasn't there. I didn't look for her face in a crowd that had other faces to honor. The certificates were sealed in thick envelopes with contact cards and clear terms clipped inside. I placed one in Anna's mother's hand, one in Malik's grandfather's. "These are yours," I said, "and they come with people, not strings." We took another breath together, the four of us, and let the cameras do whatever cameras do. Twilight folded the city into quieter shapes by the time I returned home. I set the red folder on the table and opened it to the last tab. The pen moved without hurry. Vault completed. Duplicate key lodged with council. Donor wall dedication recorded. Scholarships awarded and logged. I slid a photocopy of the vault index behind the entry and smoothed it flat the way my mother used to smooth pillowcases when company came. On the balcony, the air held a touch of autumn. You could only feel if you'd lived here long enough to notice. Traffic on the Pierce Elevated stitched a gray ribbon through the distance. I thought about what the word revenge had meant when I was young and what it meant now. It used to be fire. Tonight it was architecture load-bearing kindness that refused to collapse. I texted Reverend Molina 2 more next year. He replied with a single checkmark and a tiny chapel. I laughed once out loud. Inside, I returned the brass key to its small ceramic dish and ran a fingertip along its teeth. Quiet isn't surrender. It's a plan you can hand to the future and trust it to work. I shelved the red folder between a cookbook and a photo album where Joran is 5 and I am younger than he is now. The room went soft around the edges as the lamp clicked off. I didn't make tea. I didn't rehearse speeches I would never give. I stood a moment longer letting the day finish itself, then whispered the last thing I owed myself to say, "May what I built shelter. Who needs shelter, even if they never know my name?" The city answered with the low hum of mercy or maybe just the air conditioner kicking on. Either way, it was enough. Before bed, I cracked the window and listened a tag chimed. A bus sighed at the curb laughter 2 buildings over. Life kept its small appointments. I wrote the date in my ledger and underlined it twice at home. I'm an old mother who learned that silence only has value when it protects your dignity, not when it hides your pain. Paper trails, clear boundaries, and purpose turned my hurt into architecture that will outlast me. If someone mutes, you build a louder truth document, seek counsel, and direct your love toward work that lifts others. What would you do differently after hearing this? Have you rebuilt a boundary lately? If this story moved, you tap, subscribe, drop a 1, and tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't say why and how you'd write the next chapter. Your voice matters here. We learn across generations when we speak plainly. Share city and lesson you're taking forward now.